My husband laughed at my Halloween ritual until he saw the spirit beside our bed. That day, the rain started before dawn. Soft, hesitant, like it wasn't sure if it should fall. From the balcony of our penthouse, the city still glittered below. Lagos, the city that never slept, never forgave. And neither did I. My husband Richard lay in bed behind me, phone glowing against the darkness. He didn't bother to hide it anymore. The smiles. The whispers. The sudden laughter that wasn't meant for me. I stared out into the gray sky, the air heavy with secrets. I'd learned to read silence. His had become louder than words. When we married 6 years ago, people called us the perfect couple. He, a tech entrepreneur with the charm of a movie star. Me, the quiet philanthropist. Elegant, educated, devoted. But perfection is just a photograph. Behind the flash, there's always something out of frame. Our home was filled with glass. Walls, tables, vases, all fragile things pretending to be strong. Just like us. That morning, Richard came out of the shower humming, towel around his waist, cologne thick in the air. "Big day today," he said. "Investors' dinner at the Palms. You'll come, right?" I looked up from my tea. "You said it was a private business dinner," he smirked. It was. Until I changed my mind. I smiled faintly, the kind that hides pain behind politeness. "I'll be there." He kissed my forehead absently, the way someone pats a dog before leaving the house. As the door closed behind him, I whispered, "You won't always walk away this easily." By noon, I was in my study, surrounded by the scent of old books and sandalwood. My grandmother's old altar stood in the corner, carved from ebony, veiled in white cloth. I hadn't touched it in years. Mama Ifeoma used to say, "When love turns cold, the ancestors weep. And when they weep, they whisper." That whisper had been growing louder lately, in my dreams, in the flicker of candlelight, in the way my heart felt watched. Halloween was tomorrow, a night she always said the line between worlds softens. She used to perform a ritual then to bind love and banish deceit. As a girl, I'd thought it was just superstition. Now I wasn't so sure. That evening, I arrived at the investors' dinner late. Richard sat at the center of a long glass table, laughter echoing around him. The woman beside him, tall, polished, and unmistakably flirtatious, leaned in close as he whispered something into her ear. She laughed, a little too easily. The moment he saw me, his smile faltered. "Darling," he said, standing quickly, "I didn't expect—" "Of course you didn't," I said, taking my seat beside him. Throughout the dinner, his hand never reached for mine, but hers brushed his under the table. I saw it reflected in the wine glass. By the time dessert was served, I'd already made up my mind. If he wanted to laugh at Faith, he would learn what it means to mock the unseen. Later that night, as we drove home, he turned up the music, too loud, too fast. "Why were you staring at me all evening?" he asked, eyes on the road. I wasn't staring, I said calmly. I was remembering. Remembering what? That some promises echo longer than the people who made them. He laughed, the kind of hollow laugh men use when they're guilty. "You and your dramatic talk." Then softer, almost teasing, "You sound like your grandmother again. Are you planning one of her rituals for me?" I looked out the window. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. "Maybe," I said. "If it helps me see the truth." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." And somewhere deep inside, something old stirred. A whisper, soft as breath. Let him laugh. The spirit never jokes. That night I couldn't sleep. Richard snored lightly beside me, his phone buzzing once, twice. A woman's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it until it went dark. Then I rose quietly and walked to my grandmother's altar. Dust lay thick over the wood. The candle stubs were melted low. I ran my fingers across the carvings, faces, symbols, eyes that seemed to watch. "Mama," I whispered, "you said love must be protected. But how do you protect love that's already dying?" The air shifted. A faint chill brushed my arm. It was like the room itself exhaled. And then, just for a moment, I thought I heard her voice. By truth. Always by truth. The next morning was Halloween. While the city prepared for parties and costume galas, I prepared for something older. Something sacred. I called my mother. "Do you remember Grandma's ritual?" I asked. She hesitated. That's old magic, Ada. It's not for play. I'm not playing. Silence. Then, you'll need her beads. And a candle that burns clean. I have both. Her voice softened. Then speak your heart. But be careful what you call. Some spirits don't stop at protection. That evening, I waited until Richard left for his club party. He dressed as some Hollywood vampire. Black suit, fake fangs, no soul. Don't wait up, he said, kissing my cheek carelessly. I smiled. Oh, I won't. When the door closed, I began. I bathed in palm oil and salt, as tradition demanded. I dressed in white, the color of peace. Lit 7 candles around the altar, their flames steady and strong. Then I placed Grandma's coral beads around my neck and spoke the invocation. Spirit of love that watches and binds, let truth rise, let deceit unwind. Where laughter mocks and faith is tried, let justice walk. Side by side, the room thickened and the air grew heavy. The flames swayed, though no wind blew. I felt something shift, a pulse beneath the floorboards. A warmth at my back, then silence. I turned slowly. In the mirror across the room, I saw my reflection. And behind it, a shadow, tall, still, watching. A sudden chill swept through the room, candles flickering. I whispered, "Who are you?" The shadow didn't answer, but the scent of sandalwood filled the air. My grandmother's scent, the mirror clouded, and faintly from the fog came her voice. He laughed at what he cannot see. But tonight, he will learn to see. I froze, heart pounding. Then the shadow was gone. The candles stilled. The air calmed, and somewhere deep in the city, I heard the echo of distant thunder. Richard would be home soon, and the spirit would not be sleeping. Morning came pale and heavy, the kind of light that felt reluctant to enter the house. Richard stumbled in just before sunrise, smelling of whiskey and laughter that didn't belong to me. He dropped his jacket over the sofa and glanced toward the altar in the corner. The candles had long since burned out. The white cloth was still faintly warm. "What's this?" he asked, voice thick. "A prayer," I said simply. He chuckled, tossing his keys into a bowl. "Halloween voodoo, right?" When I didn't answer, he smirked. "You really should stop watching those Nollywood ghost stories." I turned back to the window. "And you should stop giving the spirits reasons to notice you." His laughter followed me down the hall, loud, careless, arrogant. But as he entered the bedroom, it faltered, because the mirror beside the bed was fogged. And in the center of that fog was a handprint. He stared for a moment, then wiped it away with the back of his hand. "Condensation," he muttered to himself. But the mark stayed, faint, distinct, unmoving. When he glanced away, the air behind him shimmered. Just slightly. Later that day, I noticed small changes. The lights flickered when he walked into a room. A glass cracked on its own when he slammed a door. The house began to listen. That evening, I found him sitting alone on the balcony, drink in hand. "You've been quiet," I said. He didn't look up. "You ever feel like the air is heavy?" I smiled gently. "Maybe the air's finally tired of holding your secrets." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said softly, "that when you laugh at faith, sometimes faith laughs back." He rolled his eyes. "You really believe in this ancestor nonsense?" I stepped closer, leaning in just enough for my voice to cut through the night. "I believe in cause and effect, and I believe some effects don't stop at logic." He turned away. "You sound insane." "Maybe, but at least I'm not haunted." That night, he woke with a start. The clock read 2:47 a.m. He swore he heard whispering, low, rhythmic, in a language he couldn't place. He nudged me. "Ada, do you hear that?" I pretended to stir. "Hear what?" He waited. The whispering stopped. "Nothing," he muttered. "Must be the wind," but there was no wind. The curtains hung perfectly still. 2 nights later, he woke again, this time gasping. He said someone had touched his shoulder. When I turned on the lamp, no one was there. Only the faint scent of sandalwood filled the air. He stared at me, eyes wide. "Did you spray something?" I shook my head, his voice dropped. "That smell. Your grandmother used to wear it, right?" I looked at him. "You remember?" He nodded slowly, uneasy. "She used to pray in Igbo and sprinkle that oil before she slept. She said it protected love," I whispered. "And punished lies." Days passed. Richard grew restless. He stayed out later, but the moment he returned home, something in him tightened, like the house itself was watching. He'd wake drenched in sweat, muttering things I couldn't understand. Names, please. Sometimes laughter, his own, turning into a choked cry. Once, I found him standing in front of the mirror at dawn, staring at his reflection. "Who's that behind me?" he whispered. "There's no one," I said softly. But I saw it too. Just for a second, a shimmer, like heat on asphalt. A tall shadow standing beside him, and then it was gone. He refused to sleep that night. Sat up in bed, eyes wide, lights on. Around 3 a.m., the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then died. The house plunged into darkness. "Don't move," I whispered. He grabbed my hand. "Ada, what's happening?" And then a whisper. Clear, low, unmistakable. He mocked the bond. "He shall see the truth." Richard gasped, staring at the foot of the bed. I followed his gaze and froze. There was something there, a shape. Faint, human, yet not. The outline of a woman, her eyes glowing soft gold in the darkness. The scent of sandalwood filled the air again. Thicker this time, almost choking. Richard scrambled back. What is that?" I whispered, voice shaking. "My grandmother's promise." The spirit turned her gaze toward him. Not angry, almost sorrowful. Then she spoke, her voice layered, echoing like distant drums. "Love is sacred. You broke the oath of truth." "Now the veil is lifted," Richard shouted. "Leave me alone." The spirit tilted her head. "You laughed at Faith." But Faith does not laugh. Then a silence. The lights flickered back on. The room was empty again, only the faint outline of ash on the floor where the spirit had stood. Richard sat trembling, face pale. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I asked for protection," I said quietly. "I didn't know she'd come herself. You called a ghost into our home." "I called the truth." He stood abruptly, pacing. "You've gone mad." "No," I said. "You have." With guilt, he stopped. His lips parted, like he wanted to deny it. But then his phone buzzed. He looked down. The name flashing on the screen froze him. Not a woman this time. A man, the partner he'd stolen money with, and in that instant his hands began to shake. Because now he realized the haunting wasn't just about love. It was about everything he'd done in the dark. That night, he couldn't sleep. Neither could I. He sat by the window, eyes hollow. Every now and then, he'd glance at the mirror, whisper something under his breath. Around midnight, he finally said, "Ada, maybe your grandmother's spirit is angry." I turned to him. "Spirits don't get angry, Richard. They get even." At 3 a.m., it came again, soft footsteps across the room. We both heard them, slow, heavy, rhythmic. Richard grabbed my arm. "Someone's in the house!" "No," I whispered. "Something's in the truth." He turned toward the sound and froze. Right beside his side of the bed stood the spirit. This time, fully formed, a tall woman in white, eyes burning with gold fire. Her feet didn't touch the floor. The coral beads around her neck glowed faintly, the same ones I wore that night. Richard's voice cracked. "Please, please, I didn't mean to laugh." The spirit raised her hand. The glass of water on the bedside table shattered. The mirror cracked down the middle. Then she spoke, low. "Final. Those who mock the sacred invite the sacred to watch them fall." She looked at me once, almost tenderly, and vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard fell to his knees, shaking. "Tell her I'm sorry," he whispered. "Please, Ada, tell her I'll change." I looked at him. This man who once mocked faith, mocked love, mocked me, and for the first time I felt no anger. "Only clarity, change?" I said softly. "She already has." He looked up, confused. And that's when we both heard it. The soft creak of footsteps heading down the hall. Toward the front door, the spirit was leaving, but something told me she wasn't gone for good. For 3 nights after the spirit's visit, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept the lights on, curtains closed, eyes hollow and darting. He stopped going to work. Didn't answer calls. Didn't even touch his car keys. The same car that once reeked of cheap perfume. Every sound startled him. The hum of the refrigerator, the wind against the glass, my footsteps in the hall. But what scared him most wasn't what he heard. It was what he saw, when he thought I wasn't looking. On the fourth night, I woke up to find him standing at the edge of the bed again, staring into the mirror. The crack from that night still cut through the glass like a scar. He whispered, "She's there again." "Who?" He didn't blink. "Your grandmother. She's watching me sleep." I sat up, heart thudding. "There's no one here, Richard." He turned, eyes glassy. "Then why can I smell her perfume?" And he was right. The faint sweetness of sandalwood filled the air again. I looked toward the mirror, and this time the reflection wasn't ours. It was the room, but empty, except for a single figure sitting on the bed. A woman, hands folded, her face blurred by fog. Richard's breath hitched. She's waiting for something. The next day he tried to act normal. Made breakfast. Asked if I wanted tea. Even smiled, but every few seconds his eyes flicked toward corners, shadows, mirrors, as if the world had turned into a maze of reflections. By evening, he said quietly, "I want to confess something." I didn't speak. He looked up, tears building. "The money I said I invested, I didn't. I took it, with a partner." I said nothing. He looked away, shame heavy in his voice. I told myself I'd replace it before anyone noticed. But then he swallowed. The woman I was seeing, she wanted more. She said she could help me take over the company. My throat tightened. "And you planned to betray me?" He covered his face. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't know she'd turn on me." "She didn't," I said softly. "The ancestors did." He looked up, eyes red. "Please. Tell your grandmother's spirit to forgive me." I shook my head. "You don't ask the spirits for forgiveness, Richard. You show them." That night, I placed the ancestral cloth back on the table, a white fabric embroidered with coral beads. In the center, I lit 3 candles, one for truth, one for justice, one for peace. Richard sat beside me, trembling. "Say her name," I told him. He hesitated. "Whose?" "My grandmother's." He swallowed hard, then whispered, "Mama Nena." The flames flickered violently. A wind swept through the room, though the windows were shut tight. Richard flinched. "She's here." "Keep your eyes open," I said, and then the air thickened. The scent of burning incense filled the house. A whisper echoed, not from the corner, but from everywhere at once. "The liar calls upon truth. The thief begs the giver." Richard gripped my hand. "Please, I'll return everything." "I swear!" The candles flared higher, their flames turning deep orange, the color of judgment. "Promises are easy when darkness watches," the spirit's voice murmured. "Show your truth before dawn." Then silence. The flames steadied. Richard collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I'll confess everything tomorrow." "The company?" "The affair. Everything." I looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then maybe the spirit will rest." But the spirit wasn't done. That night, the same night he promised redemption, she came again. I woke to cold air and flickering lights. Richard was sitting upright, eyes wide open. The golden glow returned, softer, slower. The air shimmered like heat. At the foot of the bed, the spirit appeared once more, taller now, more defined. Her eyes burned with something between sadness and finality. Richard whispered, "I told you I'll change." The spirit tilted her head. "Change is not spoken. It is done," he reached out. "Please, I'm sorry." But she raised her hand. The cracked mirror shattered completely, falling to the floor in a burst of glass. Richard cried out, covering his face. Then she turned her gaze to me, gentle, understanding. "The bond is restored. The truth is free." And just like that, she vanished. Morning came with an eerie calm. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, scattering across broken glass. Richard was sitting on the floor, staring at his reflection in one of the shards. He whispered, "She's gone, isn't she?" I nodded slowly. "For now." He looked at me, eyes hollow. "I'm sorry, Ada, for everything." I touched his shoulder. "Be sorry to yourself. You were the one she came for." He exhaled shakily, then stood. "I'm going to the office. I need to set things right." I watched him leave, shoulders heavy, steps slow, and for the first time in years, the house felt light. But as I began sweeping the broken glass, I noticed one shard still glowing faintly. In it, a faint reflection of my grandmother's eyes, watching, protecting. A week passed. No more whispers in the dark. No more flickering lights. The house felt alive again, but in a gentler way. As if it was breathing after holding its breath too long, Richard began to change. He sold the expensive car, closed his secret account, and returned the stolen company funds. When the board demanded answers, he didn't defend himself. He just said I was blind. But something made me see. The newspapers called it a moral awakening. I called it grace. Yet even as peace returned, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still here, quietly watching. Every morning when I opened the windows, I'd smell sandalwood for just a moment. A soft, lingering reminder. Then one evening, as the sun set over the city, I found something on the altar, something that hadn't been there before. A single coral bead. Old, smooth, warm to the touch. I closed my eyes. And in the silence, I heard her voice. Faint, loving, final. You've done well, child. But remember, and love that isn't tended becomes another ghost. That night I prepared dinner, a goosey soup, his favorite. The same meal I once cooked with tears in my eyes, wondering who he was texting while I stirred the pot. This time he came into the kitchen and said softly, "Can I help?" It startled me. Richard, the man who once couldn't boil water, now standing with a wooden spoon in his hand. Of course, I said. We cooked in silence for a while. The smell of palm oil and ground melon filled the air, warm, comforting. When we sat down to eat, he looked up and said, "I want us to start again." No lies, no pride, I studied him. His face was leaner, older. The arrogance that once lived in his eyes had been replaced by something else, humility. And for the first time, I believed him. Later that night, as we lay in bed, he whispered, "Do you think your grandmother forgave me?" I smiled faintly. She didn't have to. The lesson was her forgiveness. He nodded slowly, staring at the ceiling. I see her sometimes, you know. Not clearly, just light, watching. Maybe she's making sure we don't forget. He turned to me, eyes glistening. I won't forget, Ada, I promise. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, distant, like a heartbeat. But instead of fear, I felt peace. The following morning, I went to the altar one last time. The coral beads still rested there. I picked it up, kissed it, and whispered, "You can rest now, Mama. We're fine." And just as I turned to leave, a gust of wind swept through the room, though every window was shut. The candles flickered once, then steadied. In their glow, I saw her, faintly, standing behind me in the mirror, smiling, proud. Then the reflection faded, replaced by my own face. That evening, Richard and I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Cars moved below like fireflies. The world felt new. He slipped his arm around my waist. "Funny," he said. "It took a haunting to make me human again." I smiled softly. "No, Richard. It took the truth," he nodded. "And the truth saved us." But deep inside, I knew the truth had done more than save us. It had reminded me who I was. Not the broken wife. Not the woman mocked for her faith, but the granddaughter of a woman whose prayers still walked the earth. As the last light of Halloween faded into dawn, I whispered one final prayer. To those who laugh at faith, may they one day meet the truth. Not to fear it, but to be freed by it. And somewhere beyond the veil, a gentle laugh, my grandmother's, answered back.